Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the third class of my of my clubhouse. And if you notice, the camera is a little strange right now because I've got my puppy Peanut sitting behind me. He just needed to be very, very close today. So today is actually going to be possibly a long stream because I'm going to be talking about 4 different games, as well as my thoughts on each of them, their plots, their characters, or at least the main ones that you see, and my thoughts on the series as a whole. So it's going to get a little in depth. I apologize if you're not the biggest fan of very long streams, but we'll see how long this actually goes for. So, today we are actually going to be talking about Mass Effect. Now, I have here the picture of one of the 2 characters that you could play. You could either play a male Commander Shepard or a female Commander Shepard, but basically you get the choice of a couple of different backgrounds, which ultimately mean nothing. There are a couple of different things that you get. Hey there, Sentai. Thank you for joining us. I love the little emojis. But ultimately, the backgrounds and some of the information don't really mean much. The main thing that does matter is whether or not you're like a soldier or a vanguard or anything like that, and that just changes up your playstyle. So, basically, the way that the first 3 Mass Effect games go, because of the 4 in the series, Mass Effects 1, 2, and 3 all follow the story of Commander Shepard. And Commander Shepard is fighting against the Reapers, which we'll talk about in a bit. And the thing that I kind of have some trouble with when it comes to Commander Shepard is that you start from a place of already being kind of badass, and you didn't even earn that badassery. And it's like, okay, whatevs. We're already starting off on a big foot. So, then we move on to when you actually get started, you meet your first person, and that is, let me see if I can get this to come up, Kaidan Alenko. Puppy freaking out. He hears things. Do you need to get out? Okay. Yay, I get my chair back. I get my full chair back. Anyway, so Kaidan is the first companion that you get. And for the most part, he's kind of white bread. He is what's called a biotic. A biotic is someone who has, I basically call it a space wizard. It's probably the best way I could describe it. And he was part of a training camp that trained him how to use his biotics. And he has some, like, dark parts of his past that you end up learning as you get to know him more. But for the most part, he is static white dude. And he's kind of boring in that. And he goes through a bit of a character change as the series goes on, but for the most part, he kind of stays an oaf. It's probably the best way I could describe him. Then you meet your second person in Ashley Williams. Oh, Ashley. She starts off this game xenophobic AF. She does not like aliens, and she is very much pro-human. And while Kaidan is a pretty, like, just chill dude all around, she is very much like hardcore military and oh, there goes my phone. Why is my phone going off? Phone, be quiet. Where you have the staunch military Ashley, you have the kind of gentler Kaidan. And a lot of people really don't like Ashley because of how she first starts off with her xenophobia. And yeah, she does change throughout the series, but we'll talk about that as we go. But this first outing, my God, does it not paint her in a very good light? And part of me feels kind of bad about that because, like, I don't like seeing female characters written in, like, such really harmful ways. But then again, like, I think back to if this was a dude, it would just be, oh, okay, you're just a dick. So she's allowed to be who she is. I personally find her to be annoying, much like Kaidan is white bread. She's just annoying. The next person that we get, let me close out of these two. Get you back to there. Where's my picture? I have like a whole list of pictures of all the characters, and they're in alphabetical order, and like my brain is not braining. Okay, so there's two characters that you can get after certain events, and one of them is Garrus Vakarian. And he is my boy. I love Garrus. Garrus is a Turian who, in the canon, he's a sniper, but when you actually play with him, he's not all that good. But there is a famous phrase when it comes to fans of Mass Effect is, there is no Shepard without Vakarian. And he is your man throughout the entire series. And I like how loyal Garrus is. And he actually had, even though he's like just a side character in the first game, you actually get a lot of very interesting kind of dichotomy with him. And I did both a playthrough as a Paragon and as a Renegade for the first game. And the Renegade options actually fit more with how Garrus is, which is very anti-government and doing things yourself that might be outside the law if it's necessary. Oop, no, don't print. I was trying to minimize the window. Okay. Now, the next one that you can get at the same point in the story, I'll go over the plot once I'm done with the main characters for each game, is Urdnot Wrex, who is a Krogan, also another alien. And Wrex, a lot of people really love Wrex because, much like Garrus, he is very loyal. And the thing that I found very interesting, which will come into play when I show you the next two people in your group. But the aliens tend to have more substance to them than the humans do, which is why I described Kaidan and Ashley as kind of white bread. But Urdnot Wrex is a bounty hunter for hire from a Krogan race, and I'll go over a little bit of Rex's overall story as it comes up. But for the most part, he is very gruff. And I very much like how he kind of reacts to you and how he's definitely more loyal than what you see with a lot of Krogan, because Krogan are notorious for being very much, it's like, if it's not paying me, I'm not doing it. But Rex is very loyal to Shepard, and that goes with his personality and with the events of the game. Specifically, like, I want to say, actually, for the majority of the games, you see the amount of loyalty and trust that Rex puts into Shepard. So, with those two, there we go. The next one, we only have two more that we actually get during the first game. We get Tali'Zorah Naraya. She does go through a couple of different name changes. She goes through Tali'Zorah, Vas Dormina or something like that. And then Vas Normandy. Basically, the Naraya is based off of whatever ship that they're attached to. But for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to call her Tali. So Tali is a Quarian. As you can see, she's in a electronic suit, because Quarians can't live outside of their suit. They have a very sensitive immune system. But Tali is actually on what's called the Pilgrimage. And when you meet her, she's actually being very naive and trying to speak to someone called the Shadow Broker, who is a very... how do I put this? He's an information broker that you do not speak to. You speak to his agents. You don't speak to him in person. So, Tali is in way over her head, trying to do the right thing. So you end up having to save her. And she is between her and the next person that we're going to talk about, they are the two favorites. And I can completely understand why you like Tali, because she is incredibly knowledgeable, and she has a naivety that isn't pushing it into being stupid, and doing like stupid things. And I very much appreciate that with her, because with like strong personalities like with Rex, or then you have Garrus, you need someone who is a little more thinking outside the box that you get with someone who doesn't exactly know what they're doing. They're just kind of going by their instincts. The last character that you end up getting during the first game is also another fan favorite, Liara T'Soni. And no, I did not intend for them to be looking in opposite directions. But Liara is a good chunk of the fandom's favorite, because she is what's called an Asari, and all of their race are presented as female. And they basically reproduce by mating with other races and then conceiving children that all look like Asari. And that's the most basic of basic information that I can give you on Asari, because there's so much information about them, and I find them fascinating. They have psychokinetic abilities that allow them to merge their consciousness or their nervous system with someone else's. I'm not entirely sure how the science system works on that, but that's basically what they do. And it's really fascinating how both Tally and Liara are so naive in where they are when you first meet them. Liara is a little bit more because she seems very sheltered, and only really focusing on her archaeology projects, because she is a scientist specializing in what's called the Reapers. Or not the Reapers, on the Protheans. She's a Prothean expert. And the Protheans were a race that was around 50,000 years ago. And she is one of the leading experts on them. And it's fascinating to hear the lore of it, but much like a lot of BioWare games, there is a lot of information to take in. If you're just a casual gamer, it'll get very overwhelming very fast. So, I'm going to actually just close out tallies, and I'm going to bring back up Kaidan and Ashley. Because the one thing that is very interesting... Oh, nope, that is not the one I want. There we go. The one thing that is very well known about BioWare games is that there are romance options. For the first game, this is it. This is all you get. You get Kaidan Alenko, Ashley Williams, and Liara Tassoni. Kaidan is strictly female shepherd. Ashley is strictly male shepherd. Liara is both. And what's interesting is that when you're going through the game, if you're just talking to them and being nice to them, they'll just already assume that you're in a relationship. Like, they'll already start that. And it's fascinating that just being nice to them is what instigates you into getting into a relationship with them. And I personally, okay, we'll just go down the line. If you're going for Kaidan in the long game, that's fine. It just... You're not going to be happy with some of the choices that he makes later on because, like I said, he's white bread and he makes some decisions during the second game and into the third that it's like, do you really want to be in a relationship with that? Ashley, like I said, you'd have to deal with the xenophobia, and you can basically push her away from that and basically tell her it's like, hey, you have to deal with this. And she's like, okay, sir, I'm a soldier, you tell me jump, I say how high. And that's how she basically just handles it. So it's fascinating to how you can have such a staunch military person in a space colony and just have her be very distrustful. Now, she does mention that her reasoning for it is that her grandfather during the war with the Turians was one of the people that first gave up, and her family's kind of had a scarlet letter attached to them because of that. I'm sorry if you can hear scritching in the background. Peanut has returned and he is now sitting in his bed, or scritching in his bed. Yeah. You done? Yeah, he's done. Okay, where was I? Oh, yeah. I personally have watched people do Ashley as a romanceable option, but I'm not one of them. I usually end up going with either Kaidan or Liara. Liara primarily. And then that leads me into Liara. Because Liara can date both male and female, there ends up being a scene where if you're just being nice to them, you end up coming to a scene where either Kaidan and Liara or Ashley and Liara come to you and basically say, hey, we know that you're like kind of dating us both. Can you tell us which one of us you want to be with? And then at that point, you have to lock in whoever you actually want to have a relationship with. And whenever that happened for me, 9 times out of 10, I just chose Liara because that's who I wanted to be with. I think the one time I chose Kaidan, I was going for a very specific storyline. And yeah. Anyway. Liara is, like I said, very naive at this point, so her flirting is kind of comical because she makes some references to, like, examining you because she's very fascinated by how humans work, but she says it in a way that is very kind of sexual in a way. And what's interesting is that outside of the series, this game actually got some press because of the, quote, sex scene during the game. And what's fascinating is that, yes, there are naked alien bodies being shown. However, there are no parts actually shown. It's literally just some basic fade to black stuff. So it's not like you're being shown a full porn, but apparently that didn't matter to people who never actually played the games. So these are your 3 options for your romanceable option, and those are all of the characters that Commander Shepard gets to bum around space with. Now, here's where we get into the actual plot. We're about 24 minutes in and we haven't even really talked about the plot. Okay. So, the first thing, let's see, where is that picture? There we go. So, everything starts off on a planet called Eden Prime, where a Prothean beacon is supposedly found. And you're sent down with what's called a Spectre, which is supposedly a super cop. That's the best way I could describe it. Basically, they only answer to the council that that basically controls political matters in the galaxy, which is weird considering there's only 3 of them. And Spectres only answer to them, and they kind of can go outside the law, which opens up to a lot of issues. And while on this planet, the Spectre goes on ahead without you, and that Spectre runs into Saren. Saren is one of the main bad guys for the first game. He is also a Turian, and he is a Turian that has been indoctrinated by the Reapers. And I will show you a picture of the Reapers. Kind of nightmare feel, really. Okay. This was probably one of the better pictures that I found of the Reapers. But the Reapers are an absolutely fuck-ton ancient race of aliens that come and do a purge every 50,000 years. When races get to the apex of their evolution, they come in, eradicate it, and then basically start anew. And the last time they supposedly showed up was when the Protheans were around. So you're seeing a pattern here. The Protheans disappeared 50,000 years ago, and the Reapers are the ones that took them out. Now, Saren, let me get both of these pictures up here. Saren is currently working with the Reapers to get what's called the conduit. And let's see, it was the conduit and yeah, it was just the conduit. And for the majority of the game, you're not sure exactly what the conduit is. But you have these things called Mass Effect relays that were actually created by the Protheans. I'm hoping that I'm not going over anybody's head on this, because it's a lot of information to take in. But with the Protheans, they supposedly built these Mass Effect relays that allows you to zip through space much faster, and a lot of people are, how do I put this? They just kind of use the relays. They don't really question who created them. But Saren is under the belief that the Reapers are a good thing. Now, I don't know if that's his own madness that's kind of caused that, or if it's the Reaper's indoctrination making him believe that, because those nightmare fuel bugs, they can very subtly change your thinking so that it's in line with what they want. And that's what makes them very insidious, because they have multiple ways of indoctrination, and you could be indoctrinated and not even know it. And that's what's really spooky about them. And basically, you spend the majority of the game trying to catch Saren and find out what's going on. Now, here comes one of my pet peeves about this first game. When you first find out about Saren, you try to go to the council with it, and they're like, no, he's a Spectre. He's one of our best Spectres. There's no way that he would do this, and you would need to find proof of it. It's like, okay, that's fair. However, comma, you have literally Saren there defending himself, saying it's like, well, this human is the one that's besmirching my name. And it's like, shouldn't this just be between the council and the person that's accusing? And then if it were to actually like go to trial, then you would bring in the person that's being accused. But I don't know. It just struck me as very weird why they would have Saren there defending himself when it's obvious that the council already has made their decision. But anyway, so you go and find your proof thanks to Tali, and Saren is, quote, stripped of his Spectre status, which does not seem to do anything to stop him, which I'm like, okay, this was not really necessary. He's already got a 1,000-league head start on us. So I don't know what taking down his Spectre status is really going to do for him at this point. And you get made a Spectre, which is you are the first human Spectre to be made, because humans, being the babies of the galaxy age war, are still trying to earn your stripes when it comes to council matters. And what's interesting is that your status as a Spectre changes based off of the games and based off some of your choices later on, but it kind of fluctuates, and it really holds very little sway. I know in the third game, there is some stuff that's like, hey, because you have the Spectre status, you get XYZ. But for the most part, it does not matter. So then after that, you end up picking up Liara, and you go after her mother, Benezia, who is a matriarch, basically meaning that she has entered the last stages of the Asari lifespan, which is about 1,000 years. And sorry. And you end up basically becoming a really wise and powerful leader of a lot of people. So the fact that you're hearing that Saren is working with Benezia makes it that much harder, especially because you now have Liara, who's having to go up against her mother, which, yeah, she has some reservations about, but for the most part, she's like, my mom made her bed, and now she has to lie in it. So, yay, fun. And you end up getting to a point where you're asked to go to the planet of Virmire. If you've ever played Mass Effect, you know Virmire, and Virmire is the place where you get one of the biggest choices to make, and that is during the battle, you have Kaidan and you have Ashley. And what happens is that Kaidan is currently working on a bomb, usually. They give you a choice of whether or not you want Ashley to work on the bomb or if you want Kaidan to work on the bomb, but considering that the other post was about being a military strategist, it's usually better to send Ashley on that than to have her doing a bomb work. But what happens is that you get a choice. You can either come and save Kaidan at the bomb and get him out of there because you have what are called Geth attacking, which is a sentient artificial race that you basically fight throughout the majority of the game, that are coming to attack him, while Ashley is pinned down by Geth forces that are working with Saren and the Reapers tangentially. And you have to make a choice between the two of them. And whoever you don't choose is the one that's going to die. And that basically takes them out of the game 100%. Now, their death is mentioned a few times whenever you talk to this person and you bring it up. But mostly it's just taking out one extra person. 9 times out of 10, Ashley tends to biff it. And again, not surprising on that one. So she ends up getting taken out, and that leaves Kaidan being saved. And you find out exactly where Saren is looking for the conduit to be able to let the Reapers into their world so that they can start this harvest. Well, you find out that it's on this one planet called Ilos. And Ilos is a kind of a jungle planet versus Virmire, which was more of a tropical planet. Now, the one thing I will say about these games is that I played the Legendary Edition and the original edition. The mechanics for driving are god-awful. Absolutely god-awful. And they fixed it in the Legendary Edition, but it's still, like, kind of god-awful at times to deal with that. So traversing Virmire was kind of a pain in the ass. But thankfully, Ilos, you're mostly doing it on foot. So, yay. Yay for that. But when you get there, you find out from an AI that was left there that this is actually a resting place for a good chunk of the Prothean scientific force. And they were literally at war with the Reapers and still trying to find ways to defeat them for years. And when it became clear that they would not be able to defeat the Reapers, they put themselves into cryostasis. Now, the problem is that they didn't know how long this harvest was going to be going on, so they allowed this AI to keep them alive and to keep them going until such time that it was done. Well, years turned into decades, and soon the power for the AI was starting to dwindle, and as a way to keep himself alive, he would turn off the power to certain cryotanks. And one by one, each of the Protheans were killed because they ran out of power and weren't sustained. And it's kind of a tragedy because, yeah, this AI was basically playing God, but he was also trying to keep himself alive. So it's a very interesting dilemma when you get up to, I think, what was the name of the AI? I think it started with a V. It'll come to me. But basically, it tells the story of the Protheans and of the Reapers. And then you actually get to meet, sort of, the Reaper. Now, the Reaper is, up to this point, has been spoken about like it's a ship. A ship with some kind of telepathic abilities. What you find out is that it's not a ship, it's an actual creature. And this creature has very dark intentions with the harvest and views humans as nothing more than just basically unintelligent creatures, and that they need to be purged. And Shepard, being Shepard, is going to fight against that. Now, I know I haven't talked much about Shepard during this, but unfortunately, with the way BioWare does some of their interactions, you either get Paragon options to speak, which is usually very good, quote-unquote good, responses. Then you get neutral, which just kind of makes you middle of the road. And then you get renegade options, which is usually someone who is rude or is very aggressive. And if you're playing kind of normally, like what you would respond, you're probably going to have a middle ground between renegade and paragon responses. And you have these moments of like what I call like super paragon or super renegade, where if you have a high enough score in either one, you can say an extra special line instead of just the basic first, second, and third on the right hand side of your little conversation wheel. And unfortunately, because of this, Shepard comes off kind of like talking cardboard. Doesn't have a whole lot of personality to them at this point, but it does get a little better later on, but kind of in a weird way. Already 41 minutes and we're not even done with the first game. Anyway, so then we move on to the actual endpoint, and you find out that the conduit is actually a Mass Effect relay on Ilos that connects directly to the Citadel. The Citadel is the base of where the council is. It's where a lot of people live, a lot of diplomats live. It's basically the center of the galaxy. And what's interesting is that when you speak to the AI from the Protheans, they say that the Reaper's first target was the Citadel, which is the same place where you're now having it. So the Reapers are basically just playing the same game that they had during the Protheans, because it works so freaking well, because they were able to get the jump on the Protheans, destroy the Citadel, or at least take it over, and they were so scattered that they couldn't defend themselves properly. But with this one, they didn't count on Shepard getting there and kind of fucking up their plans. Now, if you have been speaking to Saren in either a Paragon or a Renegade way, you can actually forfeit one of his 2 fights. And I didn't realize this when I first played it, and I had gone basically the Paragon path for him and trying to get him to join back up with us and stop the Reapers. But he doesn't. He questions it, but he doesn't end up helping you at all with it. But he ends up killing himself and basically severing the indoctrination that the Reapers have placed in him. But unfortunately, the Reaper, who you find out's name is Sovereign, ends up taking over the body of Saren, which is frankly terrifying to watch, and ends up fighting you. So you get out of one fight only to end up in another, but thankfully you don't have to do 2. And you end up beating Saren / Sovereign, and you win the day. There's a moment where it looks like Shepard might have been crushed by a whole bunch of fallen debris, but ends up alive, and that's how the game ends. Now, looking at my notes, we've gone over the plot. Now, the effects of the story going forward is not really seen at this point because of the fact that this is the first game. But this basically sets up everything going forward, and it lays the foundation pretty well. Here are my issues with this game. It primarily stems from how the council acts towards you. After every major mission, you end up speaking with the council, and they never believe you about the Reapers, about Saren, about Sovereign. They just flat out do not believe you. Anytime you bring up proof of their existence, and it is by far the most frustrating part, because it's like, yes, I get that you can't believe everything that you're hearing, but we gave you what you wanted, we gave you the information that you needed, and what more do you want? And it's so frustrating. So frustrating. And the council doesn't get any better throughout the rest of the games. And it's just, it's the worst. It's the absolute worst. Okay. So now we're going to move on to Mass Effect 2, which in my opinion is the best game out of the original trilogy. Mostly because of how it's formatted. And now we're going to go into the Companions Roundup. I don't remember exactly the order, so it's going to be a little bit out of order. I know a couple of them, Oh, excuse me. Oh, wrong one. We'll get to her in a minute. I shut down Shepard. Get back up here, Shepard. Where'd you go? Yeah, because Shepard is the main thing, so I want to keep their picture up. So the first person you end up meeting is going to be Jacob Taylor. And again, he's not white bread, he's pumpernickel, but much like Kaidan, he's kind of boring. And he has a couple of other egregious things that I'll talk about later, but he is so boring. So boring. But he's one of the first people that you meet. And then you end up meeting every sweaty palm dude's favorite, Miranda Lawson. And what I find very frustrating is that her character is supposed to be absolutely perfect in every way. Perfect body, perfect hair, perfect personality. Basically, she is perfection made human. And in the original game, there is a lot of moments where the camera is specifically placed to give you the best shot of her ass. And when they did the Legendary Edition, they took out a lot of those ass shots, and people lost their shit. They were so mad that they took out all of the ass shots and everything. I'm like, are you for real? It's like, if you want ass shots, play the original trilogy. If you want actual portrayals of characters, please do that. And Miranda seems to be the canon one of people wanting to romance, which I'll talk about in a bit, because there are several romantic options in this one. Now we're going to get into the next one, which is going to be a familiar face. Garrus Vakarian. At this point, after everything that's gone on, which I'll talk about the plot in a bit, he has become a merc for hire known as Archangel. And when I tell you that this man, had me fanning myself when you find out what he's been doing, I'm like, whew, okay, now I understand why people like him. And he is one of the most interesting characters at this point because of what he's been doing. He's basically been being Batman. And that's probably the best way to describe it. He's being Batman. He's being a vigilante trying to do good on this space station called Omega, which is basically hell for a lot of people. It's just a horrible place to live, and you don't really get much of a chance in Omega to make it for yourself unless you're doing something really kind of sketchy. Pardon me, I'm needing a little bit of a candy bar break. I have not had my lunch yet, so. Oh, hey there, Ringmaster. Thank you for coming in. And it looks like I got a follower in Lincoln. Thank you very much for joining, and I appreciate you being here. I'm sorry, I don't have the chat. I have several windows up on my main screen, so I don't see the chat right away. Okay, so if I remember correctly, I'm just going to go in alphabetical order from what I have because, like I said, I don't remember exactly the order. So then we have our Krogan friend, Grunt. Grunt is an artificially created Krogan, which means he's tank-born, and he's viewed to be the perfect Krogan. And I'm like, okay, perfect Krogan. I apologize if anyone can hear me chewing. I'm eating a Snickers bar. Anyway, I like Grunt. Grunt is very much a character that you grow to love because while he is still kind of young for a Krogan, he has all this knowledge that's been pumped into him by his creator, Warlord Okeer, who who you're originally supposed to recruit for your ragtag group of people. But because of events during that, he biffs it, and you get Grunt instead, which honestly I think is a better trade in all. But with that, we move to the next one, which is Jack. Jack I like to call the biotic wrecking ball. You know how I said that Kaidan is pretty good with his biotics? Well, Kaidan ain't got nothing on Jack. She is full of piss, vinegar, spite, anger, and any other emotion that you can think of. And there's a reason why I picked this picture, because of the fact that she's basically topless in her base outfit, and I could not find a picture of her with her other outfit where she's actually got a shirt on, and I do not want to get Twitch on my back for showing nudity like that, but she does have straps covering her nips, but it's still questionable. But Jack is incredibly damaged. And she's damaged because when she was a kid, she was forced to be in this Cerberus, who is a human military operation that very much focuses on human centric problems. And she was basically forced to fight these kids using her biotic ability to make her stronger, make her the best biotic possible. Which, mission fucking accomplished, but it kind of also destroyed a girl in the process. So, yay for you. Next one. Now, this one is a DLC companion that you can have. Kasumi Gado. She is a thief. And I have mixed feelings about Kasumi because, one, I do understand her story and it is heartbreaking, but she's kind of also boring. Okay. She's very boring. Like, I think because she's a DLC character, they didn't give her a lot of backstory that would actually impact the main thing in case people didn't get the DLC. But I just don't like her. She doesn't give you a whole lot of dialogue outside of a few lines and her loyalty quest. Now, this one is one of my favorites. Legion. Remember how I said in the first game you fight a whole bunch of Geth? Well, Legion is a Geth, but he is a Geth that is part of a group that is fighting against what they call the Heretics, which is the Geth that you've been fighting from the first game and in subsequent games. They are Geth that have decided to join up with what's called the old machines, which is the Reapers, because the Reapers are a machine-like creatures. I got caramel stuck in my mouth. The joys of having a Snickers. Anyway, Legion is my favorite because when you find out what actually happened between the Geth and their creators, the Quarians, which is what Tali is, you feel a lot more like sympathetic towards the Geth and why they have decided on the path that they have. And you get him so late in the game that I wish that you would have gotten him sooner, and it would have been nice to like actually have some decent conversations with Legion. And also his name is just really, really cool. So the next one that I have here is Mordin Solus. Mordin Solus is a Solarian who is a scientist and a doctor. And he's actually, I think, one of the first people that you have to recruit. Or one of the first people. And he talks very fast. And his brain is going 10,000 miles a minute. But I never liked that the Renegade options, or even sometimes the Paragon options, were to shut him up. And I'm like, nah, let him work through his process. It doesn't make sense to interrupt him. Yeah, he's kind of spiraling off into tangents, but sometimes the tangents are what gives you more insight into the actual problem. So I like Mordin. Mordin, a lot of people like because he's just a sweet dude. And he also sings. He does a Solarian version of... what is the name of that damn song? Now I gotta change my folder real quick. A Very Model of a Scientist Solarian. That was it. And he sings a little bit of that to you, so it's like, oh, okay. Now, the next one I kind of have to talk about in tandem with each other, because you can choose whether or not to have one or the other. Okay, so we have two Asari women. We're mostly going to be focusing on Samara, this one. Now, Samara is in Asari Justicar. And a Justicar is basically what I like to think of like a Holy Avenger who goes out and fights against people who have wronged someone or who have broken their Justicar oath. And it's not explicitly stated what's actually on that like on that list of what she will go after you for, but you basically get some idea, especially when it comes to her daughter, Morinth. Now you'll notice she's got the same costume, because when you go after, one of the things that you have to do for all of your companions, there's I think 12 in all, you have to do loyalty quests with them. And in order to do Samara's, you have to track down her daughter, Morinth, because her daughter is what's called an Ardok Yakshi. And I know I just sounded like I just hawked a loogie, but no, that's actually what they're called. And Ardok Yakshi, remember when I mentioned that they have psychic abilities to be able to meld the minds of theirs to another's? Well, Ardok Yakshi are so powerful that when they meld with you, they actually burn up your nervous system. So they effectively kill you. Not effectively, they actually do kill you. And what happens is that Morinth has kind of developed a taste for this kind of thing. She's basically a serial killer. And what you can do is when you actually do get Morinth and Samara in the same room, you can choose which one you want to keep on your team, either Morinth or Samara. And the only reason in my head of why you would ever want Morinth on your team is if you were going to romance her just for shits and giggles. Because you romance her, you meld minds, and you die. And it's like, what are you doing? And so primarily I always go with Samara. But if you were to go with Morinth, she would basically take over the appearance of Samara and just do basically the entire game from her perspective. So it's like you trade one for the other. And honestly, I prefer Samara over Morinth. Now, while I eat this next piece of Snickers, let's get rid of these pictures. Now, again, familiar face, Tali. Tali ends up joining your crew at this point. And what's interesting is that now she's not really... She's still a little bit naive, but she's also grown a lot since the first game. And now she's actually able to be a commander of sorts to men of her own. And she is more cautious than before. And I really appreciate that little subtle character shift for her, because she was very trusting in the first game, and now she's being a little bit more cautious about it in the second game. Then the next one we have is one that's really kind of tragic, is Thane Krios. He is a Drell, which is kind of sad because we only ever see 2 Drells, and it would have been fascinating to see more of them. I promise that is my last bite of Snickers. Anyway, Thane Krios is an assassin who is well regarded as being one of the best. And he is... Frankly, he's terrifying when he's actually going after a person. But when you actually meet him, he is very spiritual. And when he kills someone, he prays over them. I don't remember if he prays for himself or for them. I think he prays more for himself. Like, I'm sorry that I had to do this. Please forgive me. And you find out that he is actually dying of a disease that affects his lungs, which makes fluids build up. So he is going to die, and he's going to die in the very near future. And he is a very haunted person, like haunted by the things that he's done, haunted by the loss of his wife and the plight of his son. And he's one of my favorites, but I put a very big asterisk on it of I don't like character death, so it's very hard for me to really enjoy his character because of that. And then the last companion that we have is another DLC character, Zaid Masani, who is a mercenary. And much like Kasumi, I'm not the biggest fan of Zaid because I feel like he's sort of a more intense version of Garrus. And yeah, he's more interesting when you look at the things that he says, but I don't like him. I find him to be just an absolute dickhead. And his loyalty mission also kind of plays into that a little bit. Okay, so let's get rid of all of these. Okay. So now on to the actual plot. And the plot starts off with a bang because you're on the Normandy, which is the ship that Shepard primarily uses. And all of a sudden, another ship arrives and literally just fucks your couch and just absolutely obliterates your ship and causes your death. So, end of game. Thank you all for joining me. Anyway, the thing that's interesting is that it then switches to you being brought back to life via Project Lazarus by a group called Cerberus. As I said, is a human-centric militia group. So, using both technology and organic medicine, they have brought you back from the dead 2 years later. So, even though it seems like just a few minutes for you, it's been 2 years. Which is why everyone has kind of just gone on and done their own things. And what ends up happening is that the ship that you're on gets attacked. It's basically the tutorial level teaching you again how to use your weapons. You meet Jacob and Miranda, and then you find out that the Normandy has been redone by Cerberus, and you're now basically the acting commander. And you get spoken to by who is effectively your boss, the Elusive Man. Now, I hate the fact that he's just called the Elusive Man. I wish we could have gotten an actual name for him. But this is what we got. Oh, excuse me. And the Elusive Man basically tells you, hey, we brought you back to life. We need you to help stop the Reapers, and we need you to recruit all these people to help you defeat the Reapers. And that's where you start recruiting all of your team members and getting them on your side. And the Elusive Man pushes that you need to have loyalty of your crew, which is where I mentioned the loyalty missions. And while you're doing that, you are also fighting a new enemy, the Collectors. The Collectors are a very old group of aliens that will abduct huge swaths of life from different planets and then just disappear. and there's no way to really stop them from what they're doing. And it's really tragic how they just swarm in, take what they want, and then swarm back out and say deuces. So it's pretty scary because you actually see it up close when we get, depending on who you let live during the Vermeer, will actually be on one of the human colonies that is attacked, because at this current moment, only human colonies are being attacked. And we'll just say, for the sake of argument, that we let Kaidan live during game 1. So then Kaidan is on the planet and ends up meeting back up with Shepard, who he thought was dead. Because for all intents and purposes, you were dead. And if you were in a romantic relationship with Kaidan, yes, you would have a little bit of a, oh, I missed you hug. But then he notices that you are part of Cerberus, which I'm like, okay, they brought me back and they're basically holding me onto a leash to save them from the Reapers. And Cerberus is not liked by the Alliance, which is the organization of humans that works with the Council and what Kaidan is a part of. And basically it's like the Federation for Star Trek. And he basically gets mad at you because you're working for Cerberus, even though you tell him it's like, no, they're working for me, or it's just a temporary thing, they brought me back to life, and all that. You can give Kaidan any amount of explanation and he won't take it, and he's just kind of a butthead and walks away. Even if you were in a relationship with him, he just walks off. Okay. Now that we got those out of the way, I'm going to show you the amount of people that you can actually romance. Let's see if I can actually get their pictures all together. Yeah, in this game you actually can romance Garrus, which I was fucking ecstatic about. It's going to be a little bit of picture bingo. Come on, give me, there we go. Oop. Stop it. Just want to pick up the picture. I already mentioned that you can romance Miranda, but I'm just going to put her picture up here anyway. And then for shits and giggles, I'll put Morinth up as well, because technically, yeah, you can. Nah, you know what? She don't deserve to be up there. You can try to romance Samara, but she's very much tight on her code, so it don't work out well. Come on. There we go. You actually get to romance Tali at this point. Okay, I think that's all of them. Okay, so these are the 6 people that you end up being able to romance. Now, there is a seventh one, but it's really only if you have what's called the Shadow Broker DLC, where if you romance Liara during the first game, you can rekindle your romance with her. There are a couple of romances where they're not necessarily romances, but there are romantic intentions. But with this, these are the 6 minus Liara that actually get full romantic options. So we'll start off first with Garrus. Garrus, you're able to romance him after you complete a mission where he is going to go after a guy who was on his team who basically led a raid on his crew and got them all killed while Garrus was out doing another job. So not only does he blame himself for getting his squad killed, but also for letting a traitor into their midst. So he's got a lot of personal issues with that. So once you're able to deal with that with him, you're able to start romancing him, which I personally have done twice because I find his dialogue to be entertaining. So then we move on to Tali. And Tali's is one of the more interesting loyalty missions because you find out that she is actually being accused of treason against the Quarian race for bringing live Geth onto one of their flotilla ships. Now, I didn't mention this in the first game because it wasn't too much of a plot point, but in this one you find out that, well, you find out in the first game that the flotilla is a big grouping of ships, and because the Quarians were run off their home planet by the Geth, who they created to be basically servants, they have to scrounge and repurpose everything that they have. Nothing goes to waste. And having a live Geth on a ship is a very, very big no-no. And she's accused of that. And obviously she's like, no, I didn't do this. And you have to help basically clear her name. But there's a catch. You find out that the ship that supposedly has the Geth on it is the ship that her father was on, who is part of the council. Or he was one of the admirals. Not the council. But you find out that he had taken Tali's stuff that she had sent, which was inert, wasn't functioning or anything. It wasn't alive, and actually rebuilt a Geth and turned it on, basically. So he caused the death of himself and several members of his team and allowed a Geth to be basically released into their area. So at the end of her mission, you get a choice. Tali begs you to not basically reveal what they found about her father because she doesn't want his name being dragged through the mud. And this is actually where you could end up causing some problems if, depending on what your answer is. You can do one of 3 things. 1, you can blame it all on her father, which will drag his name through the mud and you won't get her loyalty. 2, you can blame it all on Tali and get her loyalty, but she'll be exiled from the flotilla. I don't know how that affects the third game, but that's something that you can do. Or you can bluff and basically convince them that it doesn't matter what the evidence is. Tally is a good person and doesn't deserve to be treated like this. And I find it very interesting that they're able to do such different ways of completing a mission. And I always go with the talk them down option, but that's me. The next one we have is Jack. And Jack's basically whole thing is that she wants to go back to the facility where she was kept and blow it up. And she deals with a lot of her trauma that happened there and a lot of the bad feelings that she has towards about Cerberus, who was the one who actually was conducting the experiments. So trying to convince her to get onto a Cerberus ship was not fun. But she is one of the more sympathetic characters that you get because of the fact that you see her going through her memories and you see the pain of those memories, but you also see things that don't exactly line up with what she's remembering. And it's fascinating to see that kind of progression with her. Now, again, I'm going to say it. Pumpernickel. His loyalty mission is so dumb. And it's dumb because he ends up getting a transmission sent to him from his father. Now, for the last 10 years, he's believed his father is dead. But you find out, Too Long Didn't Read, that his father had actually crash landed onto a planet with the rest of the crew. And the planet has plants and flora and fauna that are psychotropic. And it really fucks with your head, and he became basically a cult leader. And specifically getting rid of all the men and keeping all the women. And I'm like, this is dumb. This is basically cult leader bullshit. And he doesn't recognize Jacob as his son because 10 years, long time. But when he does, he's, I guess, happy that Jacob is alive. But he also tries to convince him that he's not at fault for everything that he's done, which he absolutely is. And Jacob takes no shit. He wanted to actually kill him at first, but you get to talk him down and basically get his father's side of the story. But it's just not a good look. It's so not a good look. Then you have Miranda. Now, this is probably the most humanizing that they could have done with her, because you find out that she has a sister who's kind of a twin, but also kind of not, because she was born as kind of a clone of Miranda, trying to replicate the perfection that Miranda is. But she's not augmented in the way that Miranda is. And when Miranda escaped from her father, who is the one who basically pushed her into doing all of this modification on her, she took her little sister and ran. And it's kind of messed up because the guy who's helping you to get back Miranda's sister is one who betrays her, because it's like, oh, well, you didn't tell me that you stole your sister. It's like, bro, you know what Miranda went through. Why are you even questioning her wanting to get this little child out of this situation? I mean, it was so dumb. And the fact that Miranda hid a lot of information from you is also it works with her character, but it's also frustrating AF. But overall, her story ain't bad, it's just not great. And then we have Thane Krios. Thanes is dealing with his son, who he had basically, for lack of a better term, abandoned for several years, especially during his formative years. And he ends up finding out that his son, I cannot for the life of me remember his son's name. But anyway, he finds out his son has actually been contracted to kill a local politician that's running for government. And you and him work to get to him before he can kill his target and basically follow in his father's footsteps. And I love the line that he does. Colpet or Colpot? I think that's his name. But he basically says, like, oh, now you show up? Why is it now that you show up? And Thane basically has to talk him down, as well as your character helping. And it was a very kind of tender moment seeing father and son reunited and allowing them the time to talk it over. But obviously, as Thane says, wounds can't be healed with just one conversation. So it's nice that he recognizes that he can't fix the wounds that he had with just one conversation, because what caused him to abandon his son is that a group of mercenaries came and killed Thane's wife and Colcott. It's gonna frickin' bother me until I figure out his name. But basically killed his wife, and he spent the next several years hunting and killing every single person that caused the death of his wife. And unfortunately, he had to abandon Kolyat. It was Kolyat, his name. Finally. And Kolyat kind of got the short end of the stick by being abandoned by his father for him to go on this revenge murdering spree. So it's kind of tragic in that. Alright, let's get rid of these, and then we will go on with the main plot. Because unfortunately, this is why I like Mass Effect 2. The majority of the plot is centered around getting all of the companions, doing all of their loyalty quests, and then there's like 3 other plot points that are triggered by doing that kind of thing. And one of those is finding a derelict or a shut down collector base. And they get basically an emergency distress call from a Turian ship that's near it. Well, they go in there and it is completely silent. There's not a single collector around, and it is creepy. It is so creepy. It left like such an impression on me, and it's one of those ones where you're expecting something to pop out, and when nothing does, it's even worse because it just keeps building up that tension. And then, of course, the immersion is broken when you actually get in there and you do what needs to be done, and they all start showing up. So you end up having to leave, and you find out that the distress call was faked and that the elusive man knew it. So you're questioning, like, why are you sending me to places where you know for a fact that this was not a legitimate distress call? And he's like, well, we got some good information on the collectors, and that was what was important. And you're constantly butting heads with the elusive man because of it. And it's interesting that he can just kind of put away that part of humanity in him. But it's whatever. His character is kind of a butthole, but he makes sense as a villain. And even though he's kind of like your boss in this, I consider him a villain in that. And then we move to probably one of the most irritating sections, and that is going after what's called the IFF. And you're going after a piece of technology that allows collector ships to go through what's called the Omega-4 relay. Now, the Omega-4 relay, anyone who has ever gone through this thing has never returned, and no one knows why. And when they do a deep dive scan of this thing, they find out the reason that no one ever comes back is that the endpoint of this mass relay is in the middle of I think it's like a pulsar or a star that's like close to going supernova. So it's not a good place to be. And what ends up happening is that you end up finding a piece of technology that you can get that will tell the Omega-4 relay that you are friend and that you can be allowed to travel safely. Now, safe is kind of a subjective term because of things that happen during that travel to the through the Omega-4 relay that make me question, is this really friendly? But anyway, so that's when you end up getting Legion. But before you get Legion, you have to deal with an absolute deluge of what I have what are referred to as, I think, I can't remember exactly what their term is, but they're basically Reapers, little humanoid Reapers that come out and attack you, and there are various forms of them that you deal with. But holy shit, are they annoying. Especially what I call the bloaters, because they shoot out this stream of, like, energy that will absolutely just take down your shield. And I hate dealing with them. Anytime I know that they're around, I take care of them first. Because it's like, get rid of the big problem. We're an hour and 30 minutes in, and we're only through part of the second game. I'm going to have to make a second part with games 3 and Andromeda because I'm already getting tired, and I'm just going to kind of power through the rest of the plot and then give my thoughts on it, and then we'll be done. So, after you get the IFF and after you get Legion, you end up using it to go through the Omega-4 relay. Now, there are 3 upgrades that you have to do in order to not lose anyone, because this is literally a suicide mission. And if you don't do these 3 things, which is increase the hull strength, increase your weapons, and increase the shield, you will lose up to 3 people. Just off the bat. And it's fascinating because I ended up screwing up at one point and I lost someone later on. And I was like, what the fuck? I did everything right. What the hell? But anyway, so you get into the collector home base, and you find out that they are scavenging human bodies in order to fuel a new Reaper in the shape of a human. And it's like, well, that's fucking terrifying. A gigantic human Reaper. And you fight it and defeat it, and then you're basically running through the collector base, trying to get out while being chased, of course. And here's the interesting part. Throughout the suicide mission, you get multiple chances to choose different people to do different jobs. If you choose the wrong person to do the wrong job, they will die. If the person is not loyal to you, they will die. If you choose the wrong party, and you choose too many strong people during the final push, you will have multiple deaths. And it's fascinating how different your experience can be if you're not aware of what choices to make. Because there is 3 separate levels that you have to go through, and that level of specificity, it's like, it works really well with what they're working with. And you can definitely tell I'm getting tired because I'm having trouble actually focusing and thinking. But too long didn't read. You end up destroying the collector base, and depending on what you did with... Well, okay, I can't say that you destroy it because there is an option to save it. But honestly, like, if you're going for a Paragon Shepherd, you save it. If you're going for a Renegade, you probably keep it. So it's ultimately up to you what happens to it. But you get out of there, and you basically find out that the Reaper invasion is still coming. And you get a little glimpse of a whole metric fuck ton of Reapers out in the distance of space, and then the game ends. And I'm definitely going to have to make a part 2 because I have a lot of thoughts about Game 3, and I don't have the mental capacity to be able to talk about that as well. So let me swap over to the chatting one. There we go. I thank you all for joining me and going through the first 2 Mass Effect games. And next week, I will go through Mass Effect 3 and Andromeda and my thoughts overall with the series. I don't really have any issues with Mass Effect 2 as I did with Mass Effect 1. The only thing I can honestly say is probably a problem is the amount of tedium when it comes to scanning and deploying pods to get materials. But that's a tiny, tiny game mechanic. But thank you all for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!